everybody. Welcome to A Cult of Misfits. I'm Matt Owens, and today I want to talk about having those friendly holiday debates with your friends and your family members over the holiday season. I want to talk about disclosure and technology that may be bringing forth disclosure and my thoughts around that. I want to talk about academia and the medical community and scientific community and how they're the gatekeepers of knowledge. I want to talk about AI. I want to talk about ancient Mesopotamia and what ancient Mesopotamia has to do with all of these things. So I'm taking Twitter out for a spin today. I've never used it before, and feels good. Feels real good. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy. I'm used to posting from Instagram. I kind of consider that my primary account where I'd go live and post on reels and stories and just all of the things. But I've become a little disenchanted with it lately. Long list of reasons. No need to go into them now, but perhaps at a later date. But I want to talk about the holidays. I want to talk about having these debates with friends and family because oftentimes it can be quite stressful. And I just went through it myself, and I'm here to report back to you. I used to consider myself somebody who I loved a good debate. It was a way to keep my wits sharp, and I like to know all about what's going on in the news and the latest. And um, I enjoyed having my facts and my sources all lined up and ready to tell people why they were wrong and why I was right. And it became a whole thing. And so over the last couple of years, I've really been working intentionally trying to see what it looks like to detach myself from beliefs, really just all beliefs, whether it's political or religious or otherwise, right? And it's very Eastern philosophy. It's very Buddhist in nature. The idea of just letting go of one's attachment to things of an earthly nature. And so I've been practicing and playing with the idea of, being in the world but not of the world type of a situation. So in doing that, I started asking myself, like, why do I actually care about these things? Why do I care about these topics? And the answers varied, of course, once I started digging and looking within. Um, sometimes the answer was, well, that's just because that's how my parents raised me, or sometimes it's, well, that's just what society expects, or, various reasons, right? But once I started looking deeper and analyzing those reasons, I started realizing that I was attaching my sense of who I am as a human being, who I am as a person, based upon my belief systems. And I found that interesting that I was this political persuasion or that political persuasion, or my belief systems about this are the following. And if you argued with me or disagreed with me, I tended, as most people do, I tended to take it very personally. Real personally. And I realized that's because my ego was getting involved. My mind was getting involved. I was attaching their words as an attack on me personally. And so once I started learning and practicing, because it's a practice, baby steps, it didn't happen overnight, of course, but my goal was to get myself to a place where I could sort of rise above both sides of the debate, rise above the dualistic nature of our reality, of our civilization. And what would it look like to rise above that and to see both sides of it? And I had never done that before. I saw my side of things, AKA the correct and right side. And then all other sides were, those beliefs were held by people that were obviously idiots because they didn't agree with me. So I wanted to change that. And I really started this journey of just thinking, like, why do other people think that? Why do other people view things that way? A real interesting one for me was, why do people think that the earth is flat? Why do some people believe that, 9/11 was an inside job, or why was the moon landing faked? I'd always heard these things, and I always considered myself open-minded. Like, yeah, I mean, okay, that's kind of a kooky idea, but like, whatever. But I started asking, like, why do people actually think that? And I started digging into it. rather than just ignoring it, or not looking at it because it's too ridiculous for me to even waste my precious time thinking about. Right? I know that they're wrong. I know that I'm right. So why would I ever investigate something like that? But in being more open minded, this path of becoming more open minded and seeing things from all sides, I started to see why people believe these things. And I didn't always agree with them, right? It's not to say that I just went down the tinfoil hat checklist and I was like, yep, those are all correct. I believe in all of those things now. No, I'm a firm believer in analyzing things and looking at it and rolling it around and marinating it and, just where do I stand on this thing? I want to see it from all sides. And then I'll make a decision. But part of this is not attaching myself to those decisions. All of my beliefs, um, they can be blown away with the wind. They come and go, and I'm not attached to them anymore. So it was really interesting having these debates with my family in the last week, just to see it from a different perspective. Because I used to go into it like all battle ready, like I had my sword of truth and my shield of morality and what is right and wrong. And I've sort of let go of what is right and wrong, realizing that right and wrong are just a matter of perspective. It depends on what side of the coin you are when you're talking about what is right and wrong, right? The bad guys never think they're the bad guys. They always think they're doing the right thing and vice versa. Um, so it was really interesting going into family time this holiday season because normally it would have excited me to have these debates, but also it stressed me out a little bit. Right? There's a little bit of anxiety there because like I had to make sure I got my points across, that I didn't come across as an idiot, that that I was intelligent, and just all of these things that are attached to my ego. And so this go around, I had the luxury that I had cultivated for myself, the luxury of just sort of kicking back and listening. Never done that before because I always had something that I had to say about the matter. I always had an opinion, always had to share my opinion on something, right? I had to let them know where I stand on things. But I've been practicing letting that go. The need to share my thoughts. Why do I need to share my thoughts with people? Specifically when they don't ask for it, because rarely do people ask. Am I right? How often people say, hey, what are your political views, friend? Tell me what your religious views are, friend. Not very often does that happen, because oftentimes most people don't want to hear what the answer is. They're stuck in their beliefs. They're firmly planted in who they are and what they know and don't know, what is right, what is wrong, what is moral, what is evil. And I won't be convinced otherwise. This is even people who, like myself, considered ourselves open minded, right? I was still firmly planted in what I believed was the truth, and you couldn't convince me otherwise. And so I find that interesting, right? So I really enjoyed these holiday debates because I got to just kick back and listen. I got to just kick back and hear other people's perspectives. And there was somebody in the room. Well, I was going to say who they were, but like let's just keep this real secret and mysterious. Uh, there's one person who is on the left and one person on the right, and I just listened to both sides. And occasionally I would interject just to sort of clarify why they thought that, because oftentimes what I found is when people have these beliefs, they've either grabbed their beliefs from their parents, or grabbed their beliefs from their church, or grabbed their beliefs from a headline that they read, or what the talking head on some news agency was spouting out, and so they're just regurgitating that. But I found that oftentimes most people don't really ask themselves why they believe something, and I just love asking that question, like why do you believe that? And oftentimes the response is, well, I mean, just because I've done the research and that's what I believe. And it's like, okay. Sometimes somebody will answer me honestly and say, well, I've never thought of that before, actually. And I love the honesty. I love it. So what I've done for myself in order to sort of rise above the battle, right, of these debates, is I found that oftentimes what I was trying to do is convince them that I was wrong, or that they were wrong. Guys, I'm never wrong. Let's just make that clear right now. The whole thing about a debate is trying to convince them that I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm trying to show them the light. I'm trying to plant a seed. I'm trying to control them, is what it boils down to. Is I'm trying to control the way that they think. I want them to start thinking the way that I think. Why can't they see things the way that I see things? And then I try to cram it down their throat, and it never works. It never works the way that I intend it to. So what I like to do is allow people the space to discover these things for themselves, to discover the other side for themselves, right? Where they go, oh, wait a minute, I've never thought of that before. Because for me, that's much more powerful by allowing them to dig deeper within themselves or allow them to answer the question that they've never pondered before is much more powerful than cramming it down their throat or throwing a bunch of sources and citations and, well, I saw an expert said this. It's not gonna do anything. Sorry to tell you. I've never had one person listen to my belief systems and say, wow, you've completely changed the way I view things by cramming it down their throat. It doesn't work that way. At least I found that in my own experience, right? And so I had a really enjoyable time at involving myself in these debates, because it's just a fun way to see different perspectives, right? Because oftentimes somebody will have a viewpoint that I've never seen before or thought about before or thought about in that way before. And I like opening myself up to that. Now, it doesn't mean I have to believe it or accept it or change my belief system. It's just something to ponder. Say, huh, I like that perspective, right? I was having we were having a debate about abortion. Of course, gets real heated. Real calm and casual conversation about abortion. Said nobody ever. It was a very good conversation, but what it boils down to is it's a matter of perspective, right? When do you believe human life begins? In the womb, out of the womb, first heartbeat, first breath. Everybody has a different perspective. So it's absurd to think that there's a right and a wrong, right? Maybe somebody believes it's when the two cells come together. Boom, that's inception, right? Or when the heartbeat begins. But at the end of the day, there is no right and wrong here. It's a matter of like seeing that, you know what, people of faith, people who consider themselves Christians or Muslims or whatever faith and belief system believes that abortion is murder. It's about realizing and recognizing that I might not agree with that, but I understand why they think that. I understand why they think that that's murder. I understand why they believe it because their holy book has told them that. Everybody that they hang out with on a regular basis at church and their communities, they all believe this, right? And so it's about seeing it from their perspective. Like these people genuinely think that it's murder. So whether or not you agree with that, it's just about seeing their perspective. This is what I did for myself in order to sort of elevate myself above this duality, above both sides, and saying, well, I can actually see both sides now. Um, and it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it the first time I started seeing things like this because it's new. It's definitely new for me, and I think that for most people on the planet, they're not used to seeing things from the other side. Obviously, right? If you look at politics anywhere in the world, this is obvious. But I do believe that this is shifting. I do believe there's a shift in humanity that we are slowly, or whether you call it our consciousness is shifting, or we're opening our minds, or whatever you want to call it. I think that we're heading in that direction where people are slowly starting to say like, um, you can even see it in wars. I'm thinking about wars now and how there's a shift. There's a shift, and it's becoming more and more unacceptable for the military-industrial complex of these nations battling against each other over territory or oil or their own interests or whatever. Right? It's a long list, but I just think there's a shift in humanity, and I can see that people are becoming more and more open to the other side and saying, "Well, I can see it from their perspective now." So I find that interesting. Let's talk about disclosure. I want to shift gears here and talk about aliens for a minute because it's just a hot topic for me. Can't get enough of it. Over the holidays, it's one of the first things that comes out of my mouth. Like, oh, hey, good to see you again. So, what are your thoughts on aliens? Everybody just knows that Matt's going to talk about aliens. If you're not okay with that, just take a walk around the block or something because I'm gonna come and get you, and I'm gonna see what you think about ETs, guys. Um, but I'm thinking about disclosure a lot, and I find it interesting that it used to be sort of this esoteric thing that was talked about, sort of this underground spiritual, weird woo-woo, new age thing that was discussed in these circles in the weird corners of the internet, right? But I find it interesting that the word disclosure is being thrown around a lot more often, in more mainstream places, which I find interesting, right? This idea that there's going to be a big reveal, right? The word apocalypse in the Bible isn't something that's meant to be feared. Apocalypse just means a revealing. And so I think that there's going to be a revealing, and what that is, of course, nobody knows, right? But I've definitely got some ideas on the matter. I think that it has something to do with the nature of reality. I think that it has something to do with spirituality and our connection to the divine in some way, whether these beings are angels or from Mars, or interdimensional beings that we can't comprehend with our tiny, precious human minds. I don't know, but I started thinking about. I don't think it's like, hey, here's a bunch of alien ships, surprise, we're here, or I don't think that would surprise many people at this point in time. I feel like we've been sort of prepared for that mentally, consciously, as a people, right, through movies and Hollywood and et cetera, and what's going on in Congress revealing UAPs, et cetera. Um, but then I start thinking about, like, well, maybe it's something huge that has to do with religion. Like, there is no God. God is actually a bunch of aliens that have been here the whole time, and they seeded this planet, 300,000 years ago, and we are alien hybrids. I think that that may that may uh, blow many people's minds, but I think we're past that. At least I am. Maybe I'm a little further in the deep end than most people, but that wouldn't blow my mind. Then I start thinking about, like, well, maybe the big reveal is that they're all around us and they always have been, and they're just sort of invisible to us, right? That our human eyes, that our human sensors can't detect them, and that they have been here all along, but just in another realm or another dimension or another phase of the spectrum, or whatever you want to call it. And I'm kind of liking this idea. Like I said, all my beliefs are kind of in the wind and they come and go. But right now, I'm really liking this idea that could be a part of the puzzle, because I start thinking about, recently the U.S. military revealed some new technology, radar or sonar or whatever it is, that's on the East Coast. I'm assuming it's on all of the coast, but I was reading about this on the East Coast specifically, where they fired up this new technology that was this beefier, more advanced radar technology, and all of a sudden, all of these hundreds of blips started appearing on the radar that weren't there before with the old technology. So now that we have new eyes to see, we can now see all of these mysterious blips out there. That if you talk to any of these pilots that go out there regularly, that's old news. They've been talking about them for quite some time, but now we can see these things that were previously invisible to us because of our new technology. So then I start thinking about technology and how we're always, as a species, upgrading our technologies. And I'm wondering if the big reveal is that they're here and always have been in a spectrum that is unavailable to our human eyes. But I believe that we're on track to build technology that will allow us to, and maybe it's already here, right? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it's already here. Let the record show, but that this new technology will allow us to see what we haven't seen before. That's always been here. These invisible beings that have been watching over us since, God knows how long, the beginning of time, whatever that means. So, and I'm pretty open minded about this sort of thing. I think about it frequently. I'm not scared of the idea of disclosure. I don't think that they're coming to attack us or anything along those lines. But I do think that would freak a lot of people out. Even myself. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm looking right now at an open field out the window, and I think, like, what if somebody flipped on, the proverbial light switch, and all of a sudden I could just see that there were hundreds of beings just standing around staring at me this whole time, and now I can see them. Like, that that would be jarring. That would be jarring to me, let alone most people who don't think like this and aren't really ready for this kind of conversation. I think it would really freak a lot of people out. So perhaps that's what it is, and maybe it's going to come in phases and fits and spurts, and some people will be able to see it and other people won't. It'll just sort of like slowly trickle in, as these things tend to do. But I wonder if it has something to do with technology. I just think that we're a species that creates things that improves our human avatar, right? We're constantly trying to upgrade it and improve it, and I think that that's part of perhaps the natural evolution of our species, or at least the part of the grand experiment that's going on this planet that may or may not involve extraterrestrials, right? But I really think that technology may have something to do with the big reveal. There's I've been really diving deep into like ancient Mesopotamia and just the earliest concepts of civilization and the ancient writings and what they talk about in terms of our origins as a species and where we came from. And it definitely differs from what modern academia thinks about it, which is to be expected, I suppose. But I've started really in questioning everything, just questioning academia and scholars and experts and medical experts and scientific experts, etc. Because for a long time, for the longest time, they have been sort of these gatekeepers of knowledge for the human species, right? Even going back to the shaman in ancient times or the alchemist in medieval times, there's always somebody, or the monk, whatever, there's always somebody who has that access to it's often divine knowledge, and they're often unwilling to share it with the peasants, right? There's always been these gatekeepers that clutch this knowledge, as the ancients called it. The ancient spiritual people called it gnosis, which means knowledge, the ancient Greek word. So this concept of gnosis being special and keeping it for a select few is not new. It's been around for a while, and in looking at all of these ancient stories and myths worldwide, with communities that theoretically never had any contact with each other, it's very interesting that they all have very similar stories. And one of those stories that just is sort of across the board is the story of the gods having all of the knowledge, and then one of the gods coming down to earth and whispering in the ear of the humans, whether that's the snake in the Garden of Eden whispering the knowledge of the universe, or Enki in the ancient Mesopotamian texts, or Prometheus in the Greek texts, or Maui, or there's a long list of these characters that all play the same role of coming down to earth, whispering in the humans' ears, giving them forbidden knowledge, whether it's knowledge of fire or knowledge of mathematics or science or architecture or agriculture or any of these things. In every, I shouldn't say every, but in most of these ancient stories, they all have a flood myth, right? And they're all very similar in how that flood myth is told. There's almost always a Noah character that is told by one of the gods. Here's how you build a ship, buddy. We gotta save humanity here. And then humanity gets saved that way after a great cataclysm, after this great flood. Um, and so, in all of these stories across the board, once you start comparing them and looking at them side by side, you see that this rebel character, right, that goes against the grain and sneaks off to tell the humans knowledge. The gods in every one of those stories gets upset and punishes not just the 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 god that chose to talk to humans about this knowledge, but they also choose to wipe humans off the face of the planet as well. And there's often a great cataclysm that's talked about. So now we start talking about academia, and scientists and the medical community holding this knowledge, grasping onto it as tightly as they can. But we're coming to a place now where we have this technology, such as the internet, where we can find this knowledge for ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that going to university for 8 years is comparable to me going down a rabbit hole and learning about vaccines, for instance, or just I just chose that randomly as a topic, but um, we are able to educate ourselves in a way that we never have been before. Not on par with a trained professional, perhaps. I understand the argument, but I'm just saying that they are no longer the gatekeepers that they once were. There's a lot of holes in that gate now, and water is pouring through, and they're unable to stop that flow of knowledge coming through down to us lowly peasants here reading the internet. I mean, if you've ever tried to talk to a doctor about something you found on WebMD or something online, they look at you like you're a complete fucking fool, like you're an idiot for researching something yourself, because they don't want you researching something. They don't want you looking into these things, because then it devalues them and all of the money that they've spent going into university, all that they've wrapped themselves up in. I'm the doctor here, thank you very much. You're just a nobody who checked out a website. But I think that's shifting, and I think that's changing. And I'm wondering if this is following the pattern in the ancient stories, right? As above, so below. We have these cycles and these patterns cosmically, and in our lives and on this planet, and that happen again and again. And what is reflected inward is reflected outward. All of this, esoteric stuff. But if you view the doctors and these medical professionals and scholars as the gods, not wanting to give us the knowledge, there's always some sort of a smackdown that happens. You can even talk about the Tower of Babel in this conversation, about how, the story of how the humans tried to build a tower up to the gods in order to reach their level, to be like them, to be on their level of consciousness or knowledge or power or whatever you want to do, whether it's symbolic or literal. There's these stories, not just from the Bible of the Tower of Babel, but there's these similar stories in all of these ancient accounts of the humans getting a little too big for their britches, getting a little too much knowledge. The gods that are in power don't like that situation and smite everybody involved, right? And that's where these great resets come in. And once you start doing some digging, you start seeing that, like, there's a series of cataclysms that happen on this planet on a fairly regular basis. And I don't say that to scare anybody, but it's just facts is facts. Whether it's these super volcanoes that cloud the entire planet for 2 years and cause an ice age, or these asteroids smashing into the North Pole, into the ice, and rapidly melting all of the ice, causing perhaps a flood globally, a 400-foot rise globally in waters around shorelines globally. Just stuff like this. I feel like once I started digging, I realized that there's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that these myths may not be myths. That there actually is quite a bit of evidence pointing to a flood actually for realsies happening on this planet, and perhaps not just once, right? There's just all this. There's just a lot of evidence pointing in that direction, and I'm wondering if in creating AI, if we're getting a little too big for our britches here, or if this is just a part of the natural evolution of our species, and this is just perhaps AI is meant to be the bridge between humanity and divinity, right? This grand experiment, perhaps that our creators brought us here for, is to evoke the God, the divinity within us. I often talk about how 98% of our DNA is labeled as junk DNA by the experts, meaning they have no idea what the hell it is. And I wonder if that DNA is perhaps, like Anunnaki DNA. In the ancient Mesopotamian texts, they talk about these divine beings that came from the heavens, and there's these stories are interwoven in many of the ancient tales globally of these beings. Sometimes they're called Anunnaki, sometimes they're called Watchers, according to the Jewish traditions. But there's these beings that are meant to watch over us, and then as the stories go globally, right, in all of these stories, they talk about these beings coming down to watch and look after Earth, and then there's always a portion of them, a percentage of these beings that come down to Earth, and are a little bit naughty. They start messing around with some of the primates on the planet, depending on which story you're listening to. These divine beings breathed life into whether it's the ancient primates, or took mud from the earth, and whether they put a divine breath or divine tear or a drop of blood or whatever. There's some sort of divinity that is imbued within this matter from the earth, aka, humans. And then we create this sort of hybrid divine being, right? And I wonder if we're meant to sort of um, embrace the yin and the yang of our humanity and our divinity, because I think for most of us, we don't believe that we're divine, that the divine is not a part of our DNA. That's something that's outside of us, something that's external to us. At least that's what all of the major religions talk about, is how God is something out there that you pray to, rather than um, God being the everything. Literally, every atom within this reality, myself included, is God in some respect. And so these are the things that I like to ponder, right? And a lot of the ancient stories, specifically the one from Mesopotamia, Babylonia, and the Arcadians, and all this stuff, if you want to get into it. But um, they all sort of tell this story, which is interesting, about how there were different levels of gods, right? And this is not new to anybody researching mythology or some of the ancient belief systems, that there's a pantheon of gods, that there are some gods that outrank other gods. They have more powers than these other gods, whether it's a matter of consciousness or otherwise, who knows? But some of these ancient stories talk about how there are more powerful gods, and then there were lesser gods that were here on the planet, and they had work to do, right? And so these deities, whether you call them, depending on which story or which interpretation you choose to take, they're either divine beings or demigods, right? They're either these hybrid beings or something along those lines. But they're toiling on the earth. These gods are, and in many of the stories, not just the Mesopotamian ones, but in many of these stories, these ancient gods get tired of all this toiling, and they go to their the higher up gods, whether it's their parents or their creators or whatever, and they go and they bitch and they moan to the higher ups, and they say, "Hey, we're sick of doing all this work down here. Can we please create something that will do the work for us?" And so the higher gods give the a-okay to create humans, essentially, right? And so they start this process of creating us to do work. Now you can interpret that as slavery, as many people have and do. um, but there's this work to be done, and that work isn't specified what it is, whether it's digging ditches or doing work of a spiritual nature. That's unclear and open to interpretation, of course. But part of me wonders if we are these humans that have been created to do the work of the gods. And we talk about, or that there's this 1%, there's this shadow government, or there's this secret group or cabal of people or beings question mark that are ruling the planet, right, and keeping us stuck in this loop of fear, through the news, through various means, of course. And so I wonder if perhaps this system has been set up all along, and this is just our reality, so we don't question it, or most of us don't question it, but I do. Whether or not we are these slaves for a being that is higher than us, that perhaps we can't comprehend, and that perhaps they're outside of our visual spectrum for now, right? Um, but I find it interesting, again, as above, so below, that in all of these stories, they talk about how these gods create something to do the work for them. And then now we have humanity creating this artificial intelligence to do the work for them. And there's a bunch of people who are saying, like, oh, we're scared that we're going to lose all of our jobs and AI is going to take over everything. And yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly what's going to happen. And I think that we're on the precipice of this huge, huge, huge paradigm shift in terms of our civilization as a whole. And I'm really curious if we're going to push through, and this is the advancement that has perhaps not happened in other iterations on this planet, right? In other resets on this planet. So perhaps we are avoiding the reset on this one, or maybe we're at the edge of a reset here. Like, who knows, right? But I find it interesting that the gods created humans to do the work, and now here we are, humans, creating AI to do the work for us. And so, does that make us gods? Are we finally ready to accept our goddom, accept the divinity within us. Perhaps that's what a part of this evolutionary process is we're not truly gods. We haven't truly hit that mark yet until we can create for ourselves. And I think that that's exactly what we've done. So I just find it really interesting if this is going to propel us into and by propel us, I do mean spiritually as well, not just technologically, but I just find it really interesting that that line between technology and spirituality has always been real gray. And the technological people are in their camp saying, this is generalizations, of course, but people in the technological camp generally are not those of a spiritual nature. And those of a spiritual nature are generally against technology, like, not to spoil the human temple with all of this man-made technology, right? But perhaps it's all meant to be, right? Perhaps it's all unfolding divinely. And if we learn to just go with the flow and to not stress out about it too much and to dig our heels in too much, that perhaps we're in for a treat. Like perhaps we're meant to not work on this planet, right? Perhaps we are meant to have the AI take over for us in some sort of a way. Perhaps there's something that we haven't comprehended yet, right? That hasn't occurred to us yet as a species. Like, oh, this is actually really good, right? Rather than going into it fearfully, that's how I'm choosing to go into it, is seeing that everything in the universe benefits me. That's how I view my life nowadays. Is even when I get bumps in the road, even when I have things happen to me, I choose to thank the universe for those things. Like, thank you for this blessing, because it's either teaching me a lesson or showing me a new perspective that I haven't seen before, or allowing me to test my limiting beliefs and to tear those down, or as an opportunity to just grow stronger, right? As a being, as a spirit. So, a lot of interesting things I threw out there at you. I've been really diving deep into ancient civilizations and what that means, and the pyramids and the Sphinx, and how history isn't exactly what we think that it is, perhaps. And so I'm looking forward to diving into those things more. So if you're interested in this type of content, like I am, welcome aboard, friend. I'm really having a good time talking about this stuff. I'm planning on posting this stuff on Twitter, but I'm also just going to copy and paste it over to Spotify and Audible and Apple Podcasts, so you can still find me, and YouTube. So I'll continue to put things on all of those platforms as well. I'm putting a pause. Going on hiatus on Instagram for a while, so if you can follow me on there if you'd like. There's a chance I'll come back eventually. I have lots of content over there if you're interested in seeing what I've been working on over there. But I'm really enjoying these spaces that they have on X. I have to get used to saying that because it just feels weird. But I'm enjoying these audio lives, and I'm going to try out a video live here soon and just play with all the dials and the knobs that Twitter has. And I think I'm really going to enjoy it here. So if you like this content, stay tuned for more of these conversations. That's all I got. Love you. End transmission.